Rachel, I have to say, speaking to Valentina of Daye, her company with women's health products in multiple facets of women's health, was eye-opening and invigorating and hopeful, because this woman has ideas that are literally going to save the day, if you will.
It's really amazing. And one of the reasons I so love doing this podcast with you is we're always learning. And when we envision this podcast about the intersection of patient care, unmet needs, and businesses, Valentina is the personification of that. She has the business background. She has understanding of the law, the FDA process, and you will see amazing facility with the science of the vaginal microbiome and women in general at an amazing level.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I was particularly impressed with her concern about public health, young women education, and the environment, which is so important, especially for the upcoming generations who really are basing a lot of their women's health choices on sustainability.
Well, we are fangirling, so take a listen. We think you'll find this fascinating.
Welcome to the Business of the V. Hello, friends and colleagues. I'm Dr. Alyssa Dweck.
And I'm Rachel Braun Scherl. Each week, we bring you the most fascinating investors, inventors, entrepreneurs, academics, and healthcare practitioners who are making things happen in women's sexual and reproductive health.
If you are a woman, know a woman, have a business, or care about your V health and wellness, fasten your seatbelts and listen in to another informative and inspiring episode.
We are so excited to have our guest today, Valentina Milanova, who is the founder of Daye, which is an amazing women's health company that is doing all kinds of interesting things and being successful at it. So welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Let's start with, what is Daye? What was the vision, and where are you? It's clear that you're taking it to bigger and bigger places with each year that you're in business.
Yeah, so my original vision for Daye has always been first to create a very comprehensive gynecological health platform that would be able to support women and AFAB individuals from their first menstruation through to menopause and beyond. And the reason why we want to take such a comprehensive approach is because we realize that in order to do gynecological health well, you need to account for the relationship between your vaginal, menstrual, and hormonal health. You can't really treat one without affecting the other. So what we're trying to do at Daye is to enable every patient to have full ownership and full control over their entire health history across the way in which your vaginal, menstrual, and hormonal health interact with one another.
So interesting. I noticed on the website for Daye that you made mention that you started menstruating at age 9 and that they were painful menses from the get-go.
Yeah.
I'm sure this had something to do with your vision. Can you talk to us about how you have really formulated a platform with so many products and some really based on menstrual pain, and take us through the tampon, the pad, and also the CBD variety?
Yeah, so when I first started my menstrual cycle, I was very young. At that time, so that was about 20 years ago, it was very unusual to have started your menstrual cycle that young. Now it's no longer so unusual because women and girls are starting their menstrual cycles younger and younger. But for me, I was so young that no one had had a conversation with me just yet about what to expect or the ways in which my body was going to change. So I actually didn't know anything about menstruation. I didn't know about the concept of menstruation. And like many other women who still to this day have their first menstrual cycle and assume that they're dying or that they're ill, I had the same assumption. So I thought that there was something fundamentally wrong with my physiology, with my body, that I had some kind of a disease. And I felt very ashamed. So I wanted to hide it from my parents. I wanted to hide it from my peers. I didn't want anyone to know that I had started my menstrual cycle. And immediately, so after my first menstrual cycle, I immediately started experiencing quite severe menstrual pain, which very quickly became debilitating. So I could no longer really attend while I was on my period. I couldn't do anything other than sit in bed with a hot water bottle. And because my parents didn't know that I was on my period, they couldn't really understand what was wrong with me every 28 days or so. And what really still fascinates me to this day is how little education and awareness there is about menstrual health. And this is the case all over the world. So really in every geography that Daye is active in, we see the same stories of people starting their menstruation and not knowing, feeling entirely unprepared by the changes that their body is going to go through. And the other issue that I personally experienced is that we still use hormonal contraception as the first line of defense against menstrual pain. And I'm not anti-hormonal contraception. I'm actually very in favor of hormonal contraception. So I think we have a whole nother separate issue related to the fact that we've started villainizing hormonal contraception. So people are afraid of it now. They think that it's like taking a cancer pill. In my opinion, this stems from the fact that we don't personalize contraception recommendations. We just, let women figure it out by themselves with the trial and error process, which is very unsophisticated. And we also use contraception for purposes that it shouldn't be used for, such as treating menstrual pain in very young girls. So I was put on the pill age 10. So again, very, very young, when I finally came up to my parents to explain the fact that I was bleeding and I thought I was dying, and they took me
Logistically,
to a
what were
doctor.
you doing to capture the menstrual blood? You didn't tell your parents. I imagine at 9 you didn't have a job, so you couldn't go out and buy your own product. What were you doing when you were on your period before you told your parents in terms of collecting the blood or not having it? I mean, it couldn't be on your sheets because you didn't want your parents to know.
Yeah, I was spending, well, that's a very interesting question. I was spending a lot of time on the toilet bowl so that it would just fall in the toilet. I was using toilet paper as a makeshift pad. I didn't know that menstrual products existed, right? Because I wasn't sure what was happening to my body. And also you don't really have these conversations in schools. No one really talks about the different options that you have available for managing your menstrual flow up until your later teenage years. And I also bled through very frequently through my jeans, through my pants. My favorite accessory at that time was a hoodie that I could always conveniently wrap around my waist so that I could hide my menstrual stains.
Oh my goodness, I hear about these free flow stories all the time, meaning menstrual cycles just free flow until they're over because of lack of knowledge about products or whatnot. But I just wanted to emphasize something that you said that really strikes a nerve, which is that the average amount of time it takes to diagnose painful periods as a potential medical issue, such as endometriosis, is 7 years. And that's just so unacceptable. I cannot even imagine what you went through at age 9 worrying about that. So I just wanted to note that.
So for those of you who didn't hear Valentina say that this was 20 years ago, you're still a young woman. If someone was just listening and didn't know your age, it sounds like you could be talking about the 1920s. I mean, it's really shameful. And one of the things that's so amazing about you and so many of the entrepreneurs in women's health is you took something that was incredibly painful and lonely and hard and scary, and you're doing something about it so people don't go through the same experience. Was that one of the motivations you obviously have menstrual products, but the diagnostic side and, the vaginal and microbiome health, talk a little bit about how that plays in and how your experience informed the thought process of that product development.
Yeah, well, obviously all of the free bleeding wasn't very healthy for my vaginal environment. So as another issue that I developed in my kind of young preteen years was chronic vaginal infections, which are also such a stigmatized topic. Like we would never dream to hide the fact that we have the flu or, a chest infection. But when it comes to an infection of the vagina, even though they are so common, we are so afraid of sharing that we have one or talking about it or seeking care. So for me, yes, the experience of gynecological health was always subpar. And initially, I thought that my experiences were just rare and unique and particularly unfortunate. I just thought I had a lot of bad luck. But then when I started having conversations with my peers and my friends, I realized that this is actually the norm, that most of us have a gynecological health nightmare or a gynecological health horror story within particularly our teenage and early 20s years of growing up. So I just feel really strongly that for women and AFAB individuals to fully participate in society, to fully live up to our human potential, to fully take part in the economy, we can't be held back by our physiology. And for us to not be held back by our physiology, we really need to drive modern medicine's understanding of what causes gynecological disease and how best to treat gynecological disease. So that's why I felt so strongly about creating a company that has a very strong medical focus. So all of our products go, first of all, we design all of our products in-house, which means that we recruit female participants to our clinical trials, and we're very involved in having, female-led focus groups and female patients-led product design. This enables us to actually address the real needs of women versus to just repurpose an existing product for gynecological health. And all of our products go through clinical trials. All of our products go through really extensive post-market surveillance. And I really want to see more of that biotech and medtech innovation in the gynecological health space. And I see a lot of interest from femtech founders to, do the hard work of scientific innovation, medical device design. But what's really lacking, as I'm sure you're painfully aware yourselves, is access to public and private funding. So what we're seeing in the femtech space right now is a lot of apps, a lot of content-based solutions, but that's not enough. For as long as women have actual physical vaginas, we will need actual medical devices and actual pharmaceuticals to support us.
Have a couple of questions that are sort of just, details about your products, which I find fascinating. So number one, CBD in a tampon. Is this regulatable in the US, or are they just in the UK? And if so, how well are they working for pain?
So cannabidiol is a very interesting industry. When I was first starting Daye in 2017, GW Pharma had just received an FDA approval for their cannabidiol-based childhood epilepsy medication. And there was a real opportunity for the cannabidiol industry to evolve in a more medical direction. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. What happened instead is we started seeing cannabidiol and CBD in particular becoming like a hype product. So a lot of different brands would add CBD to shampoo, mascara, dog treats, just all sorts of products that you don't necessarily need to have cannabidiol in. And also cannabidiol was starting to be positioned as this miracle cure-all panacea. And it's not, like, no ingredient, no pharmaceutical, no molecule can support that many different areas as there are claims for cannabidiol-based products. The reason why I wanted to create a cannabidiol-based tampon for menstrual pain is because the vagina is really richly saturated with endocannabidiol receptors. The endocannabidiol system is the one that's responsible for modulating our response to pain. It's also responsible for modulating our sleep. So I had the hypothesis that we could apply cannabidiol in a targeted way directly to the vaginal environment, which is highly absorbent. There's a lot of arteries which link to the uterus that are found in the vaginal environment. And the other thing that attracted me to cannabidiol from our early clinical work is that it doesn't suppress the growth of lactobacilli, the good bacteria that make up a healthy vaginal microbiota, but it does suppress the growth of E. coli, which is a pathogen that's typically associated with UTIs. So that was for me a big advantage of cannabidiol, the pain relieving properties and the fact that it doesn't disrupt your vaginal microbiome.
It's fascinating. And thank you for that explanation. To my next point, when we're using your product, your tampons, for diagnostic purposes, so I see that you had partnered with another company that provides telehealth and, whatnot. Does if you're absorbing menstrual blood sending it off for a test after 20 minutes of absorption, how is it possible to separate the bacteria that naturally rely on blood as a medium and the bacteria that you want to look for to suggest infection? How is that all working? Because that's fascinating. And there is some thought that some menstrual blood may in future be helpful for diagnosis of cancers of certain types.
Yeah. So I'm very excited about the use of menstrual fluid for a variety of different diagnostics, but at Daye we decided to not use menstrual fluid. What we process is vaginal fluid and cervical fluid, because from a patient experience point of view, if you have to wait for your menstrual cycle in order to get screened, that could introduce screening delays.
Yeah.
And it also means that if you are perimenopausal or menopausal, you won't be able to use the test. Similarly, if you're on long-term contraception or if you're pregnant or trying to conceive, again, you wouldn't be able to get screened. Working with menstrual fluid, again, I'm very excited about the opportunities, but the science, in my opinion, is still quite early.
Yeah.
And you also need to develop not just a novel sample collection device, you need to develop novel diagnostic assays that are suitable for for menstrual fluid, not just for vaginal fluids. So the route that we've taken instead with Daye is we use a tampon as a highly effective sample collection device, a device that's both familiar and also facilitates increased diagnostic accuracy through improved sensitivity and specificity due to the increased sample collection that a tampon facilitates when compared to a swab. So a tampon covers a much bigger part of the vagina and it collects a lot more bacterial mass compared to the swab. And this allows us to work with existing diagnostic assays, such as the one provided by Roche, Hologic, LabCorp, BD. It also means that we don't have to develop an entirely novel diagnostic assay, and it means that we don't need to separate the menstrual effluent, so we can just work with the vaginal fluids versus try and separate the endometrial lining cells, the actual menstrual effluent, as well as the vagina.
Got it. Thank you. Very complex, of course.
So, at least the three of us spend a lot of time using the language that you're using. So it's familiar. So for people who are listening, there's a lot of discussion on the biome, started with the gut biome, and now we're at the vaginal microbiome. Can you describe what the vaginal microbiome is, what it means when it's healthy, how you're finding out that it's unhealthy, so people who are entering this space either as consumers or investors have a better understanding of what has become fairly common language in the product development and medical side of gynecology?
Yeah, so the vaginal microbiome is a composition of good and bad bacteria that are naturally found within the vaginal canal and the uterus. The vaginal microbiome is like the immune system to our reproductive tract. It's associated with our fertility function. So a disrupted vaginal microbiome has been linked to an increased risk of adverse fertility outcomes, including miscarriage and preterm labor. And also a disrupted vaginal microbiome is associated with an increased risk of vaginal infections, including STIs. Now, the vaginal microbiome differs in a few main ways compared to the gut microbiome or the skin microbiome. The main way is that it's significantly less complex. So due to the acidic vaginal environment, there aren't that many different pathogens that can survive in the vagina. So it's easier to test for and find clinically significant pathogens for which there are established treatment pathways. So what we do at Daye is we use quantitative PCR, which is a highly reliable diagnostic technology in order to identify the presence of pathogens which could lead to reduced fertility, increased vaginal infections, etc. And to also quantify the overall balance between the healthy bacteria, the lactobacilli, and the unhealthy bacteria, which are the pathogens. And this helps us start a conversation with our community around whether they have any vaginal infections that need to be treated and whether they should be doing certain lifestyle interventions in order to better manage the growth of good bacteria in their vaginal environment. So this could be, stopping douching, changing the vaginal lubricant that you use or the brand of condoms that you use, changing your diet, etc.
So you're not diagnosing. You're using the information to indicate potential changes. Like, how would you describe, Yeah, I'm always conscious when I'm talking to Alyssa, that we don't want to remove the physician or the healthcare practitioner from the practice of care. So how do you communicate with your consumers when there is something that's potentially concerning? Where does the more traditional medical system fit in?
Yeah, so no lab test is a diagnostic by itself. When you go to have blood drawn for diabetes or for your thyroid health, your lab results are never a diagnosis by themselves. They're a support tool for a diagnosis. So in order to facilitate the diagnosis, we take down your entire medical and symptom history, and we share that with our team of gynecological health experts, which are available for virtual consultations. So that they can use your symptoms, your health history, and your diagnostic results in order to inform your diagnosis.
Here's today's hot flash. About 12 billion pads and 7 billion tampons are discarded each year in the US alone, according to experts. And while many of these products will end up in a landfill, others clog sewers and contribute to staggering plastics in the oceans. I want to change gears for one moment, if it's okay, and understand your sustainability angle, because that is super, super important to patients, especially the younger patients coming up who are very environmentally concerned. And also as part of that, the recent study that came out suggesting some metals being found in, more traditional tampons and the like. So I just wanted to get your comments on that.
Yeah, so at Daye we've been testing our tampons for toxic metals, microbiological contamination, pesticides, PFAS since 2019, and absolutely no one cared about that. We've been uploading our lab results to our website. Nobody cared. So I'm very excited that we're now starting to have a bigger conversation about how little we know about the manufacturing processes behind tampons, about the testing requirements for tampons. And it's not just tampons, it's all period care products. It's period pants, it's period cups, it's pads as well. They're not very well regulated. So for example, the FDA does not require that you list the ingredients of that go inside the period care product on the box. There's no requirement for human clinical trials, and there is no requirement for ongoing lab testing or ongoing post-market surveillance in period care. So this study, it had limitations. So obviously the extraction process that was followed in a lab environment does not fully replicate what happens in the vaginal environment. However, I do think it raises some very interesting questions about what needs to be done to ensure the safety of tampons and period care products as a whole. And it also raises some, other bigger societal questions around the overall levels of pollution that we're exposed to, because there's lead and aluminium in our food supplies and in our water supply as well, in the soil. So it's very hard for us to avoid all toxic ingredients, PFAS and toxic metals.
Are your tampons all made of bamboo, did I read, or is it organic cotton or something else?
We use organic cotton and cottonized industrial hemp. Hemp is a very absorbent fiber, which is carbon neutral, and it restores the health of the soil. So it's a regenerative crop, which is partially why we selected it.
Yeah.
But what's so amazing is looking at your background, unless I missed something, you're all about business and econ and law. But listening to you, you have 4 patents. You obviously understand the science. Was this all on the job training?
Well, I did study medical device law and public health, but yes, a big part of what I've learned about gynecological health has been just through my personal experiences, and then Daye has enabled me to learn a lot about manufacturing and medical device regulations and material science innovation as well.
Amazing. So you've been successful at raising both public and private financing. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing. What is the next phase of growth? What are new products on the horizon? You're obviously on a roll in an environment where it's very difficult to raise money. You've successfully done that. So what's next for you?
What I'm really interested in from a product development perspective is utilizing the data that we've collected through the past 7 years in various clinical studies on the relationship between disruptions in the vaginal microbiome and adverse gynecological health outcomes. I want to be able to deploy that data towards developing novel lactobacilli-based therapies for specific pathogens. So there are pathogens that are associated with obviously vaginal infections, but also pathogens that are associated with endometriosis, with adenomyosis, with fibroids, with endometrial cancer. And we have an ongoing issue with antimicrobial resistance. It's a big public health concern. And in general, the way in which we treat vaginal infections today leaves many patients predisposed to a second, third, fourth, etc. infection, because antibiotics and antifungals kill all bacteria indiscriminately, good and bad. So after a course of vaginal infection treatments, you're left with a very small level of lactobacilli, which need to be repopulated. So I'm interested in just changing the way in which we treat vaginal infections by focusing on strengthening the levels of certain positive lactobacilli, which can kill specific pathogens. So I'm interested in developing a lactobacilli-based therapy for acute vaginosis, for ureaplasma, that doesn't contribute to antimicrobial resistance and doesn't leave you more prone to a follow-on infection. And now that we have the diagnostic tampon on the market in the UK and the US, I see a lot of patient stories with people who have zero lactobacilli, so no lactobacilli whatsoever in their vaginal environment. And this really worries me. It makes me believe in the scientific theory, which is coming up now, that the human microbiome might become extinct over the next 100 years. So I'm excited to contribute towards not just the human microbiome not becoming extinct, but also towards improving the standard of care for vaginal infections and vaginal and uterine pathogens.
Yeah, you know, I'm so curious. In my world of gynecology, we talk about lactobacilli, but we talk about Crispus, we talk about acidophilus, we talk about, you know, some of the more common strains. What and why, what led you to choose Lactobacillus plantarum for your products? I'm so curious about that. Has not come across my radar in any big way.
Yeah, so we synthesized a specific strain of Lactobacilli, plantarum 35, because it's very effective against Candida. And Candida is one of the most common vaginal infections. It causes yeast overgrowth, which can lead to pain, burning, itching, general discomfort. And it's just very effective against Candida. So that's why we chose it, and that's why we commercialized it.
Excellent. Well, fascinating, right, Rachel? I feel like we could talk to you all day. Literally, no pun intended, all day.
I bet you get that a lot. In women's health, we find there are a lot of puns, both purposeful and by accident. Well, we want to thank you for taking the time with us today. And importantly, for all the work that you do. You know, one of the things that strikes me as you talk, I always say this about Alyssa, she takes complex ideas and makes them palatable. And, you know, kudos to you for understanding the business, for being able to break down the science in ways that consumers can understand. And, you know, we always say knowledge is power. You're giving women the tools to know more, to do better, and to be healthier. And when I say do better, I don't mean that from a judgmental standpoint, but you have to know more to be able to change something. You have to have the information. So thank you for all the work you do, and we wish you continued success.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Don't forget, subscribe to our podcast at businessofthev.com for the latest trends and trendsetters in women's health and business.